Hey guys, this morning Trump is set to announce that he's going to sign an executive order aimed at reducing U.S. prescription drug prices by 30 to 80%. That's pretty dramatic. Prescription drugs they can be very expensive in the United States compared to the rest of the world. People go to Canada or Japan or Mexico and you pay like 3, 4 times more in the United States. And everyone's like, why is that? Why is this? Why are we being screwed here? And so the way Trump is going to do this is what I want to talk about and the potential risks or objections to it. And if I think this plan is a good plan. And the first thing you have to understand, I'll try to simplify this the way I understand this, is this mostly targets Medicare. Medicare. Medicare is a huge program. Obviously, it's old people over 65. That's the government helps pay like 80% of your bills is basically how it's set up. It's a little more complicated than that. And Medicare also includes some other people now too. It just started for old people, but it's also some people have disabilities that are on Medicare. Medicaid, that's for poor people. And sometimes Medicaid, people also have Medicare. It's a little confusing. But Medicare is huge because obviously old people tend to use more prescription drugs. You have diabetes or you have a heart condition, you need to get your cholesterol down or whatever. So that's a huge market. There's something like 50 million people in America on Medicare. And so that is a big thing to target. And that is what Trump is targeting that. And the way he's doing this is what he calls there's two things in Medicare for drugs. There's Plan B, B as in boy, and Plan D. Plan B is for drugs that you go to the doctor to get because of, say, you have cancer treatment. They tend to be very expensive drugs. Plan D, as in dog, they're kind of drugs you take, let's say, to get your cholesterol down or you have some heart medicine. Because they're priced a little different in how the government does this. And currently, Plan B, meaning boy, that's the drugs you get, like cancer drugs. I mean, so you got to take them because you don't want to die of cancer, but they're very expensive. And right now, how Medicare deals with this is they're like, okay, here's what we'll pay. We'll take the average of all the people, all the drug companies, what their average price is, and that's what we will pay for. And plus, then we'll add 6% as kind of a kickback to the doctors. And Trump says, no, 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 no. What we're going to do, instead of just basing on the average of the drug companies in the United States, we're going to be doing this internationally. So if whatever, let's say, cancer drug, it costs, let's say, in Canada or Mexico or Germany, we're going to average this across the world. And that's all we're going to pay for, meaning Medicare. And so Medicare will tell the doctors or the services, the hospital, the drug manufacturers, we're only going to pay this much for your drug. It's just that simple. And so this is Plan B. Plan D, which is other type of drugs, they're going to do another scheme, but it's try to allow more negotiations on how much to pay for the drugs. So how did we get to this point? And this is a little bit kind of confusing because people are saying, well, why do we have to pay so much more for drugs than other countries? And part of the reason is that the pharmaceutical companies, they invest in a lot of money to research new drugs. It sometimes requires like $1 billion to create a new drug, to test it. It takes a long time. It's a very complicated procedure. So to be fair, these companies are putting a lot of money into these drugs and they want to get a return on their investment. And they get the return on the investment through you, dear Americans. We subsidize this. And then for the rest of the world, they get the advantage of it. So the rest of the world, they're kind of freeloaders on us. So we, the United States, create these great drugs that can extend your life, treat cancer, heart disease, whatever. And we develop it here, and they charge a lot to Americans or to the government through Medicare. And then eventually it gets to the rest of the world and they get the cheap brand. So that's part of the reason it happens. And with Trump, we're not going to do that anymore. They're going to do, they're going to average it based on the world. And so there's some potential problems with this, right? Because one of the issues you'd have here, I thought this initially, well, what if you have a cancer drug? And right now, let's say in the United States, they charge you $1,000 a pill, but in other countries, it's only $100. So what will happen is Medicare will say, the government, we're only going to pay you pharmaceuticals $100 for this pill, not $1,000. What will happen there? Well, one of the things that could happen is you could have the pharmaceutical company saying, "Well, no, we're not going to sell it for $100." And so at that point, then if the government's only going to pay $100, meaning through Medicare, you as a consumer would potentially have to pick up the rest. So you'd be paying $900 now, and the government will say, we're only going to pay up to $100. Now that's not likely to happen because the drug companies, they don't want to be priced out of the Medicare because, again, that's a huge chunk of their business. So it's unlikely they'll do that, but it's a potential problem. And the other issue is a threat to innovation, they call this, where drug companies are like, well, why should we invest in learning new drugs, putting billions of dollars? We want to get a return on our investment. And if you're not allowing us to do that, then what the heck are we supposed to do? It's just not worth it for us to spend the money in new research. So that's another fear, is that medicine development will become stagnant because, again, the rest of the world depends on us developing these drugs. A third issue that could happen is potentially the drug manufacturers, they will think, oh, okay, Medicare is only going to pay, let's say, $100 for a drug, but we're just charge the private insurance more because we got to recoup our losses there. And so that would be bad. If you're not on Medicare, then if you have your private insurance, everything's going to get more expensive. But again, that probably won't necessarily happen because the private insurance companies, they have a lot of pull too, and they'll go to the drug companies and say, hey, you can't charge us. You're just paying this much. Medicare is just paying you this much. We're not going to tolerate you, screwing us. So there'd be a pushback there. And then the final problem I looked at, people were objecting to, is doctors. They get a lot of kickbacks. They don't call it kickbacks, but they get pushed by the pharmaceuticals. They get a lot of trips or conferences. So if a doctor, like if you push enough of our medicine, so a pharmaceutical rep will go to the doctor and say, hey, push this drug. And if you push a lot of this drug, we'll invite you to be at our speaker at a conference in Hawaii. You and your wife we'll pay for the whole trip. So, your speaker, speak for 10 minutes. They're basically bribing doctors. And what will happen if we get to this new plan, there's going to be less money to do that sort of thing. Because you remember they used to get a 6% kickback on the drugs. Now that won't happen under this new policy. But in general, I think this is a great policy. I think this will lower the cost of prescription drugs. And while there's a risk, there may be a little less innovation. I'm not really sure. There'll still be I think, a motive to research, because what may happen is the rest of the world, they'll start to see a little bit higher prices because we can't just subsidize them anymore. So drug manufacturers will say to like Canada, I'm sorry, we can't give you these low prices anymore, Canada. We got to make up the difference. Everything's being averaged now. And we were screwing America. We were really hitting the American consumer with a huge high price point. You guys had a real cheap one. we're bringing the American price point down, but we got to raise yours up. So I think what will happen here, and this is a really American first policy, is if you're an American, you will start to see lower prescription prices. If you're overseas, if you're Canadian or Mexican or Japanese or German, you will see the prescription prices start to rise as pharmaceuticals will say, we can't cover you anymore. So that's kind of basically how it is. Again, it's aimed at Medicare. And you may think, well, I'm not on Medicare. That's just old people. So how does this make a difference? Well, it kind of trickles down because if Medicare demands a lower price, all they'll pay for, and they're huge, like 50 million Americans are on it. Insurance companies then will follow suit. They won't want to pay more than Medicare is paying for the drugs. And the drug companies, if they want to stay in business, they're going to have to accommodate. They're still going to need to make their margins. So the only way they can do that, because again, the price will be based on an average of all the countries, and we're getting screwed. They'll lower our price for American consumers, but for foreigners, their prices will be going up. And so, like if the socialized healthcare of Britain, when they negotiate a price for drugs, their price is going to be going up now because of this. So this is a really good deal, I think, for Americans. It's not a good deal for people overseas, though. It's also not a good deal for the pharmaceutical companies, and they're going to lobby against this. And I've talked about how powerful a lot of lobbies are. Obviously, the Israeli lobby is very powerful. They control my Senator Tom Cotton. But there's other powerful lobbies too. Let's just don't think it's all Israel. You have the military industrial complex, Lockheed Martin, they pay off people. But the pharmaceutical companies, they pay off a lot of the senators and congressmen. So they're going to be putting a lot of money in trying to get this to be stopped. It's going to be interesting to see the Democrats being opposed to something like this that will actually lower medical costs to Americans, but they'll probably be in that position to have to do so because they hate Trump so much. So it's a little complicated, but I just want to try to explain this a little, what this means for you. And my review, I think this is a good plan by Trump, and I hope it is implemented. Talk to you guys later.